The sun glinted off the polished floors of the Marine Corps graduation hall, golden rays cutting across crisp uniforms and the anxious faces of proud parents. From the back row, Mara Ellison stood stiffly, gripping the wooden seat in front of her. Her heart thrummed so loudly she was sure her son Caleb, seated on the stage with hundreds of other newly minted Marines, could hear it. She had only come to see him graduate, to witness the moment every mother dreamed of. Nothing more. Her jeans and simple blouse made her blend into the crowd, but when the light caught her sleeve just right, the intricate black ink peeking from under her cuff stirred a memory. A Marine Corps emblem tightly inked with the motto Semper Fi, and a date burned into her skin, March 14, 2003. No one else in this hall would recognize it, except him. Across the aisle, Captain Daniel Harper scanned the audience, checking for VIPs and families. He stopped mid-step. His eyes locked on the subtle curve of Mara's forearm. The emblem was unmistakable. His heart skipped, a frozen gasp caught in his throat. That insignia wasn't decoration, it was a battlefield mark, a declaration of a woman who had fought and survived when so many hadn't. He had seen the emblem before, on fallen Marines, on war heroes whose stories were whispered, never written. Mara shifted slightly, unaware that someone was staring so intently at her. She had not expected recognition. She had buried her past years ago, traded combat boots for civilian shoes, memories for silence. Her son knew only the gentle, protective mother who had raised him through scraped knees and quiet heartbreaks. But now her secret, the part of her life she had hoped to keep hidden, was staring back at her in sharp, icy clarity. Captain Harper's mind raced. Should he approach? Should he call security? He felt a mixture of awe and disbelief. How had fate placed her here in civilian clothes, just to witness her son graduate, right under his watch? His instincts screamed that Mara was more than she appeared, that the calm mother in the hall held decades of unspoken battles and unspeakable courage. Mara leaned forward as Caleb received his certificate, pride lighting up his young face. The applause echoed around the hall, but all Mara could feel was the sudden tension prickling her skin. She sensed, though she didn't understand why, that someone had noticed her. Someone who could see more than the surface. Captain Harper made a decision in a heartbeat. He stepped closer, weaving through parents and proud siblings, his eyes never leaving her tattoo. Every step weighed heavy, each movement precise. He had been trained for danger in foreign deserts, for ambushes in enemy territory, but nothing had prepared him for this. A mother in a civilian hall, armed only with ink and memory, stopping him cold with the weight of her past. And then, just as Mara's son turned to wave at her, the captain froze, his hand halfway to tap her shoulder. His mind whispered what he could not yet speak aloud. She's one of us. The hall erupted in cheers, confetti swirling in the sunlight, parents snapping photos, and Mara's heart lifted at her son's triumph. But somewhere deep inside, a storm had been awakened, a recognition that would unravel the quiet world she had built around her. And in that split second, the world shifted, and Mara Ellison's carefully hidden past collided with the life she had fought so hard to protect. The hum of the old Jeep rattled over gravel roads as Mara drove toward the base, her mind replaying moments she had tried to forget. Caleb had begged her to come, his letters insistent. Asterisk, Mom, I need you there. Just watch me graduate. Asterisk, she had agreed, but the weight of memories made her grip the steering wheel tight, knuckles white. This wasn't just a graduation. It was a collision with everything she had run from. Years ago, Mara had been known as Sergeant Mara Ellison, a Marine with sharp instincts and a reputation for fearlessness. Desert sunburns, midnight raids, the constant roar of helicopters. These were her lullabies. She had led squads through hostile terrain, saved lives under fire, carried the wounded while bullets zipped past, and earned scars that never healed. But she had left that life behind, trading chaos for the quiet suburban streets where Caleb could grow safely. Her tattoo, the emblem on her forearm, was a fragment of that life, inked after a mission that had cost her more than friends. March 14, 2003, a day of fire, betrayal, and a single decision that had haunted her ever since. She had chosen to save a squad over following orders, a choice that earned her both admiration and silent censure. The Marines who had understood had left her alone. The ones who didn't, had let her go quietly. She thought she had buried it all, yet here it was, exposed to a stranger who could read it like a map. Mara parked near the base gates and watched the ceremony tents from a distance. Families clustered together, faces beaming, the air electric with pride. She felt a pang of guilt. Caleb had grown up knowing nothing of her past. She had shielded him, told stories of ordinary days, scraped knees and quiet victories. Now she realized the truth might spill over without warning, triggered by a single glance. Inside the hall, Captain Harper's eyes hadn't left her for a second. He had been in the Corps long enough to recognize the difference between a simple tattoo and a marker of experience earned in fire. Every line, every shading on Mara's arm screamed stories of desert heat, ambushes, and silent heroism. Yet she looked ordinary. A mother, trembling slightly as her son stood tall in dress blues, unaware of the storm brewing, just rose away. Mara's breath caught as she thought about Caleb. The boy had grown into a young man fiercely proud of the uniform he now wore, yet completely naive to the sacrifices that shaped the mother who had raised him. She had told him bedtime stories of courage, but never of the missions, the nights filled with gunfire, or the faces of fallen comrades she carried in her memory. He had only known her gentle warmth, the hands that bandaged scrapes, and the arms that held him through nightmares. A sudden gust of wind lifted the edge of the ceremony tent, rustling banners and stirring dust. Mara's eyes flicked toward the stage. Caleb saluted, the sunlight catching his medals, and a swell of pride and sorrow filled her chest. She had wanted this life for him, safety, normalcy, happiness, but now the past threatened to intrude. The Marine captain approaching her could unravel it all with nothing more than recognition. Captain Harper paused near the entrance, observing, calculating. He had faced threats in the desert, seen courage tested in fire, yet here the tension was different. It was subtle, almost invisible. A mother standing quietly, her son unaware, a tattoo speaking volumes only he could understand. His instincts whispered, she was a Marine. Not just any Marine, a force of nature who had survived what few could imagine. And now, right here, right in the hall, her story might collide with her son's in ways she couldn't control. Mara's hands trembled slightly and she brushed at her sleeve, hiding the tattoo as best she could. The instinct to protect her son was stronger than ever. Yet deep down she sensed the recognition in Harper's eyes was only the beginning. She had survived deserts, gunfire, betrayal, but could she survive the past she had carried so carefully, now staring her straight in the face in the form of a Marine captain frozen at the back of the hall? Years before this quiet graduation hall, Mara had been the kind of Marine that commanders whispered about in reverent tones. She was a storm in combat boots, precise, fearless, and relentless. Her team had learned quickly that hesitation meant disaster. Desert winds burned skin and grit into every crevice of their lives, and Mara moved through it like a shadow, silent and deadly. She carried more than weapons, she carried responsibility, and every life under her command weighed heavily on her shoulders. The night she earned the tattoo was etched into her memory like a scar on her soul. March 14, 2003, her unit had been ambushed deep in hostile territory, a firefight that lasted hours under a bleeding moon. She had led her team through narrow alleys of sand and stone, rescuing a wounded Marine pinned down by enemy fire. Every decision had been a gamble, every movement a test of courage. By the end, half her unit had been injured, some she couldn't save. The inked emblem on her forearm was a promise to remember them, to never forget the sacrifices etched into her life. Mara had been good at hiding this part of herself. After leaving active duty, she traded medals for quiet streets, gunfire for bedtime stories, and combat missions for soccer games. Caleb had never known the nights she spent staring at the ceiling, haunted by what she'd witnessed. He knew her as a loving, gentle mother who kissed scraped knees and celebrated every small victory. Her strength had always been invisible, tucked behind soft smiles and warm hugs. Yet that strength never faded. It was a living pulse in her veins, a quiet hum that resonated with every heartbeat. And now, as she sat in the back row of the graduation hall, it pulsed again, not in preparation for battle, but in recognition of danger she couldn't yet name. The eyes of Captain Harper had locked on her tattoo, reading her past like a battlefield map. She felt exposed in a way she hadn't in decades, and for the first time in years, Mara realized that someone else knew what she had lived through. Flashbacks of her team's camaraderie flickered behind her eyelids. Faces she had laughed with, cried for, and fought beside appeared in sudden clarity. Private Logan, always joking despite a limp from an old injury, Sergeant Reyes, whose quiet wisdom had guided Mara in countless ambushes, Corporal Diaz, whose laugh had broken tension at the worst possible moments. They had trusted her with their lives and she had kept that trust, every mission, every scar, every decision. But her greatest mission had always been Caleb. Leaving the Marines had been less about safety for herself and more about ensuring her son had a chance at a normal life, untainted by the horrors she knew too well. She had wanted him to grow up without the shadows of deserts, gunfire, and fallen friends lurking in his dreams. And for years she had succeeded. Until now. The sound of applause pulled her back to the present. Caleb was receiving his certificate, pride etched across his young face. Mara's chest swelled with love, but beneath that warmth, anxiety clawed at her ribs. Captain Harper was approaching, deliberate and measured. She could feel it, an invisible thread pulling them toward inevitable confrontation. Every instinct she had learned in combat whispered caution, yet a small spark of curiosity flickered inside her. Why had he frozen? Why had recognition struck him so suddenly? Mara's sleeve slipped slightly as she adjusted her blouse, and Harper's eyes narrowed, scanning every detail. She had trained herself to remain calm in life-and-death situations, yet now her heartbeat betrayed her. He didn't just see her tattoo, he saw her history, her choices, and the woman she had spent years trying to hide. And though Mara had faced firestorms, ambushes, and betrayal, nothing had prepared her for the storm in the eyes of a Marine who knew her story before she had even spoken a word. The hum of the graduation hall faded into a distant blur as Captain Daniel Harper moved closer to Mara. Every step was deliberate, measured, military precise, but his mind raced with a mixture of disbelief and awe. He had recognized the tattoo instantly, the emblem of the Marine Corps intertwined with the date of a fateful mission, a mission whispered about in barracks but rarely spoken aloud. The woman before him had survived that day when many hadn't. And here she was, disguised as a simple mother, attending her son's graduation. Mara felt the shift in the air before she saw him approach. Something in the way the energy in the hall seemed to bend toward them made her pulse quicken. Her instincts screamed caution, memories of ambushes and desert firefights rising unbidden. Yet nothing in her training could prepare her for the feeling that someone could read her life in a single glance. She adjusted her sleeve again, trying to hide the tattoo, but it was too late. Harper's eyes had already found it, scanning the emblem with an intensity that left her momentarily frozen. "Excuse me, ma'am," Harper said, his voice low but commanding. Mara's heart skipped a beat. He didn't ask for introductions or explanations. His tone carried recognition, respect, and something unspoken, almost reverent. "I need to speak with you. It won't take long." Mara's mind raced. Should she brush him off? Avoid the conversation? Her instincts told her this was no ordinary recognition. Harper wasn't a civilian. He had seen the world she had lived in, had fought the same battles, or at least known the stakes intimately. She nodded once, curtly, and followed him toward a quiet corner of the hall. Once they were out of earshot of the crowd, Harper studied her carefully. "Mara Ellison," he said slowly, the name rolling off his tongue as if tasting it for the first time but understanding it fully. "You served with Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 2003. You were in the ambush at Al-Qadir, and you—" He stopped abruptly, realizing that every word was laden with memories she had tried to bury. Mara stiffened. The past she had locked away, the decisions she had agonized over, the sacrifices she had made, was suddenly exposed. "You know about that?" she asked, voice trembling slightly though she tried to mask it. Harper nodded, his expression unreadable but intense. "I know what that emblem represents. I've seen it before, on fallen Marines, on the walls of barracks, in reports. I didn't expect to see it here. You shouldn't be here alone." Mara's throat tightened. Her protective instinct surged, shielding her son from any danger or intrusion into their carefully constructed civilian world. "I came here for my son," she said quietly. "Nothing more. I'm not the same person anymore. That life is over." Harper studied her for a long moment, his gaze piercing. He could see the hardened resolve beneath her gentle exterior, the unspoken strength that had carried her through decades of fire and loss. "It's not over," he said finally. "Not for you, not for anyone who's lived what you've lived. And I need you to know. I understand. I've seen what you did, what you survived. You're not just a mother in the crowd. You're a Marine." The words hit Mara like a tidal wave, stirring emotions she had kept submerged for years. Pride, guilt, sorrow, and relief all collided in her chest. She wanted to deflect, to brush it off, but the weight of Harper's recognition made it impossible. For the first time in years she didn't have to hide. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because your son deserves to know the full story," Harper replied, glancing toward Caleb on the stage. "And because someone like you, someone who survived when most wouldn't, shouldn't have to hide anymore. Not from me, not from him, not from the world." Mara swallowed hard, feeling both exposed and vindicated. She had survived deserts, firefights, and betrayals, yet this quiet acknowledgement from a fellow Marine, was more overwhelming than any battle she had fought. And as the sounds of applause and celebration drifted from the hall, Mara realized that her carefully hidden past was about to collide with her son's present in ways she hadn't anticipated. Mara stood in the quiet corner of the graduation hall, her pulse a drumbeat of memories and dread. Captain Harper's words echoed in her mind, unsettling the fragile calm she had built over the years. "Your son deserves to know the full story." The sentence was simple, but its weight pressed against her chest like 1,000 unseen hands. She had spent decades shielding Caleb from the truths that could shatter his image of her, and now those truths demanded exposure. Her gaze drifted back toward the stage. Caleb stood tall, receiving his diploma, a perfect picture of pride and accomplishment. The sun caught the gold braid on his uniform and Mara's chest tightened. She had trained herself to hide in plain sight, to live a life of quiet courage, but every instinct screamed that her son's world was about to collide violently with hers. She swallowed, trying to force her breath to steady. Memories of her deployment surfaced unbidden. The desert nights, scorched air, the deafening silence between firefights. She recalled the faces of her fallen squadmates, the faces of men and women who had trusted her with their lives, who had been her family in the most dangerous corners of the world. The tattoo on her forearm was a promise, a living testament, and now it had betrayed her anonymity. Harper had seen it. He recognized it. And that recognition meant everything was about to change. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she clenched the hem of her blouse. She had survived ambushes, betrayal, and desert firestorms, yet the uncertainty of telling Caleb the truth felt more perilous than any battlefield she had faced. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, watching him graduate, celebrating from the sidelines, but never as a Marine herself, suddenly revealed, her past a living shadow looming over the boy she loved. Captain Harper's gaze remained fixed on her. He seemed to understand her hesitation without words. "You can keep walking away," he said quietly, "pretend this is just another graduation. Or, you can trust me. I know what it's like to carry burdens, to fight battles others will never understand. But hiding your truth from your son? That could be the heaviest battle of all." Mara's eyes filled with tears, the first she had allowed herself to shed in years. She had buried her pain, her courage, her fear, beneath layers of normalcy for Caleb's sake. And now Harper's recognition and quiet understanding tore at that fragile barrier. For the first time in decades, she realized that living in silence came with a cost, one her son might have to bear without her guidance. She remembered the look on Caleb's face the day he had enlisted, determination, pride, and an unspoken hope that he could live a life of honor without shadows. Mara had tried to prepare him for the challenges of military life in small ways, discipline, resilience, courage, but she had never told him what it meant to fight in the fires of real war, to make life-and-death decisions before breakfast, to see friends fall and never return. The applause from the stage faded into a distant hum as Mara made her decision. She would not hide anymore, not from Harper, not from herself, and not from her son. The past had been a burden, yes, but it had also shaped every fiber of her being. And Caleb deserved to know the woman who had raised him, the Marine who had survived, loved, and sacrificed more than he could ever imagine. Captain Harper's eyes softened, reading the resolve that had returned to Mara's stance. He nodded once, a silent affirmation, as if passing her an unspoken permission to step into her own history. Mara drew a slow, deep breath, feeling the storm inside her settle just enough to take the next step. The quiet corner of the hall no longer felt like a refuge, it was the threshold. Beyond it waited truth, confrontation, and the fragile promise of understanding. Mara straightened her shoulders, slid her sleeve up deliberately, and let the tattoo catch the light. It was time for secrets to be told, for courage to be seen, and for the bond between mother and son to be tested in ways neither could yet imagine. The applause in the graduation hall swelled as Caleb stood at attention, shaking hands with his commanding officer. Gold braid gleamed against his crisp dress blues, medals catching the sunlight like tiny stars. But despite the celebration, his eyes kept flicking toward the back row, toward the woman whose presence had always been a constant in his life. Mara's sleeve had slipped fully, revealing the tattoo to Harper, but she hadn't yet drawn Caleb's attention. And yet, a subtle shift in the air didn't escape him. Something was different. His mother, always steady, always calm, seemed tense, her hands clutching the edge of the seat, her jaw tight. Her gaze was fixed somewhere beyond him, sharp and unreadable. Caleb's instincts, honed through months of rigorous training, picked up on the invisible tension radiating from her. "Mom?" he whispered to himself, scanning the rows of spectators. Her eyes met his for a fleeting second, and she gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. But it wasn't the soft reassurance he had come to expect. It was something else, A warning, a signal, a weight pressing down that Caleb didn't yet understand. Captain Harper remained a few feet away, watching Mara with an intensity that Caleb couldn't see from his vantage point. But somehow the unspoken connection between them, the recognition of shared history, courage and battles past, radiated outward, almost tangible. Caleb could feel it even if he didn't know what it meant. His mother's presence had always been comforting, predictable. Now it was charged, alive and terrifying in its unfamiliarity. Memories flickered in Caleb's mind, stories his mother had told in fragments. Of resilience, of courage, of doing what was right even when no one watched. He had laughed at them as a child, admired her quiet strength, but never imagined the depths she had endured. Yet now, seeing her hands shake slightly, the light catching the curve of her forearm, a shadow of understanding passed through him. Something extraordinary, something hidden, was unfolding before him. The ceremony continued, voices echoing, confetti drifting lazily through the sunlit air. But Caleb's focus had narrowed. He couldn't see the tattoo directly, but he sensed its significance. Something in Harper's posture, the way he had approached his mother, spoke volumes. And Caleb, trained to read tension, to detect threats, to notice the unspoken, began piecing together fragments of a story he hadn't known existed. Mara's chest rose and fell in quiet, controlled breaths. Each inhale reminded her of the years she had spent hiding, protecting, and surviving. Each exhale reminded her that the past was no longer hers alone. It was seeping into her son's present, and she would have to guide him through it carefully. Caleb's heart quickened. He loved his mother fiercely, had trusted her without question, but the faint lines of worry on her face, the subtle tremor of her hands, the sudden intensity in her gaze, all of it stirred a new emotion, awe mixed with fear and curiosity that burned brighter with every second. The applause reached a crescendo as the last cadet shook hands with the commanding officer. Families cheered, but for Caleb, the world had narrowed to a single undeniable fact. His mother, the woman who had always seemed ordinary, carried secrets, and those secrets were alive now, pressing closer with every heartbeat. He didn't yet understand the full story, but he sensed the storm coming. The calm he had always known was gone, replaced by tension, recognition, and a truth waiting to be unveiled. The hall's celebration had become a distant hum for Mara as she followed Captain Harper to the side, her heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. The applause, the laughter, the flashing cameras, it all faded into background noise. Her son was still on the stage, unaware of the storm gathering behind him. But soon that storm would reach him. Harper's voice was calm but insistent. Your son deserves to know the truth. Not just a mother's version, but the reality of who you are. Mara swallowed hard, the weight of decades pressing on her chest. She had shielded Caleb from firestorms, ambushes, and the haunting echoes of loss. She had hidden her scars, both visible and invisible, behind gentle smiles and bedtime stories. But the moment had come. She turned her gaze toward Caleb. His eyes met hers, bright and proud, yet shadowed with curiosity. Something in her posture, the way she had revealed her tattoo, had caught his attention. He had sensed the tension, felt the invisible thread linking Harper and his mother. And now he waited, a question unspoken on his lips. Mara's voice trembled at first, then grew firmer. Caleb, there's something I need to tell you. About who I am. About who I was. She motioned for him to step aside with her, away from the crowd. Harper gave her a nod, stepping back, giving space but remaining close enough to protect, to witness, to guide if needed. They moved to a quiet corner just off the hall. The sunlight slanted through the windows, dust motes floating lazily in the golden light. Mara inhaled deeply, the scent of polished floors and spring air mingling with memories of desert wind and sweat. I wasn't always just your mom, she began, her voice soft but deliberate. I served in the Marines. I led squads, I made choices in battle, choices that saved lives and cost others. I carried a tattoo to remember those I lost, to remind myself of who I am, and who I was. Caleb's eyes widened as he saw the tattoo, inked lines and symbols he had never noticed before. Recognition flickered across his face, not of the emblem itself but of the courage, the weight, and the history it represented. His mother's hands had held him through scraped knees and tears, but they had also held weapons, guided soldiers, and steadied the frightened. You were in the Marines? Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper. All this time? Mara nodded, swallowing a lump of emotion. Yes, and it was dangerous. I survived things you couldn't imagine. But I left that life so you could have a chance at a normal one. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you, from the weight, the fear, the danger. I wanted you to grow up knowing only love, only safety. Caleb's chest tightened as the pieces fell into place. The strength he had always admired in her, the calm in the chaos of his childhood, the resilience he had taken for granted, it all made sense now. The woman who had seemed ordinary was extraordinary. She had fought battles, carried burdens, and survived. And now, standing in sunlight with a Marine captain watching, she was letting him glimpse the truth. Harper, standing nearby, nodded subtly, a silent affirmation that her past was recognized, honored, and understood. Caleb's eyes flicked from his mother to Harper and then back to the tattoo. The moment was a collision of past and present, of battles fought and battles still to come. Mara took his hands in hers, feeling the tension, the awe, the love. I did it all for you, she said softly. And for all those I couldn't save. But I need you to understand, strength isn't just in fighting. It's in surviving, in protecting, in loving despite everything. Caleb's eyes glistened, tears threatening but unfallen. Pride and reverence surged through him. He had trained, he had disciplined, he had faced challenges, but nothing compared to the revelation that his mother was a hero. Hidden in plain sight, her courage etched into every line of her body, every memory she carried. The graduation hall buzzed with energy, confetti drifting lazily through beams of sunlight, parents snapping photos, and the proud chatter of families celebrating achievements long earned. But for Mara, the atmosphere was taut with tension. Her revelation to Caleb had been only the first step. The echoes of her past were already stirring in ways she hadn't anticipated. Captain Harper's eyes scanned the hall, alert to more than just Mara's history. He had fought ambushes, faced deception, and trained himself to detect threats before they emerged. Now, in this ordinary-looking hall filled with civilians, his instincts whispered danger, subtle, almost imperceptible but unmistakable. Someone else had noticed Mara's tattoo, someone whose interest didn't carry respect but calculation. Mara felt it too, a prickling at the base of her neck, the same sensation she had felt countless times before, when lives depended on anticipation and split-second decisions. Her hands clenched subtly, her pulse quickening. She had left combat behind, yes, but instincts like hers didn't simply vanish. Caleb, standing nearby, sensed the shift as well. His mother's composure had always been a safe harbor, and now it was a signal. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, the slight narrowing of her eyes, and the subtle positioning of Harper between them and the rest of the crowd. Something had changed in an instant and his military training kicked in. This wasn't ordinary, something was approaching. A shadow moved at the edge of the hall, a figure lingering just beyond the cluster of proud parents. Mara caught the glint of a camera, a phone, anything that might capture the tattoo and broadcast her past to the world. She had survived bullets and betrayal, and she would survive this intrusion too. But this wasn't just about her, it was about Caleb. Her son's pride, his understanding, his first moment as a Marine, she would protect it at all costs. Harper leaned slightly, whispering in her ear. They've noticed. Not all eyes are friendly. I've seen this before. Stay close to him, stay alert, and don't make sudden movements. I'll handle this. Mara's heart pounded, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Every detail, the flicker of movement in the crowd, the glint of sunlight on polished floors, the shifting weight of spectators, was magnified. She had faced sniper fire and ambushes, but the principle was the same: protect what mattered, anticipate threats, and act decisively. Caleb's eyes met hers, the unspoken question clear. What's happening? She took a measured breath, the quiet strength he had always admired radiating from her. Stay calm, she whispered, her voice low but firm. Just stay calm and trust me. Harper positioned himself slightly ahead, a shield between the subtle threat and Mara's family. He didn't need to explain. Mara understood instinctively. She had been in this role countless times, leading squads, guiding the vulnerable, surviving chaos. Now the battlefield had changed, no desert, no gunfire, but the rules remained: vigilance, precision, protection. The figure in the crowd shifted again, moving closer, unaware that they were now in the presence of two Marines whose skills extended far beyond the average parent or officer. Mara's eyes flicked to Caleb and she saw comprehension dawning. The weight of his mother's past was no longer a story, it was alive, dangerous, and real. The hall seemed to contract around them, sunlight becoming sharper, the air thicker with anticipation. Mara felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, tempered by calculation. She wasn't hiding anymore, not from her son, not from Harper, and certainly not from the approaching danger. Every muscle, every sense, every memory sharpened. The air in the graduation hall felt charged, the hum of celebration masking a storm building just a few feet away. Mara's eyes locked on the intruder, a stranger whose gaze lingered too long on her exposed tattoo. Harper had already positioned himself, a silent shield between threat and family, but Mara didn't flinch. She had faced ambushes in deserts and alleys, firefights in darkness, decisions that could mean life or death for those she loved. This was no different. Caleb's heart pounded in sync with hers, his training guiding his awareness even as confusion clouded his understanding. He had always admired his mother's calm strength, but now he was seeing it in motion, alive, precise, unyielding. Every subtle shift of her body, every measured glance, radiated authority. She wasn't just the woman who had kissed scraped knees or comforted tears. She was a Marine. A warrior. The intruder stepped closer, unaware of the silent warning radiating from Mara and Harper. Mara's fingers brushed against the edge of her blouse, the tattoo visible, a beacon of unspoken history. Harper's hand hovered near his holster, alert but restrained. Every sense Mara had honed over decades screamed readiness. "Step back," Mara said quietly, but the words carried an undeniable weight. It wasn't just a command, it was a force of will. The intruder froze, sensing something he couldn't fully identify. Mara's gaze didn't waver. "You don't want to test me." Caleb's eyes widened as realization struck. This was no ordinary stranger, no random curiosity. His mother's past, the stories he had only glimpsed in fragments, was real. Alive. Dangerous. And she was ready to protect him at all costs. The intruder hesitated, then smirked, misjudging her presence. Mara shifted, a subtle motion, and Harper stepped forward, voice low and commanding. "Walk away. Now." In that moment time slowed. Mara's instincts, Harper's training, Caleb's emerging awareness, all converged. The intruder realized his miscalculation too late. Mara moved with precision, guiding Caleb behind her while Harper intercepted the threat. The confrontation was swift, controlled, a testament to years of unyielding discipline. Caleb watched in awe as his mother, the woman he had always known as gentle and protective, revealed the full extent of her courage and skill. She didn't fight for pride, didn't seek attention. She fought for him, for Harper, and for the countless invisible battles she had survived. Once the intruder was safely removed, Harper exhaled slowly, his gaze meeting Mara's. There was relief, yes, but also deep respect. He had known her past, but seeing it in motion, seeing her protect her son, was profoundly moving. Mara's chest heaved with adrenaline, but beneath it was a serenity she hadn't felt in years. The storm had passed and she had emerged unbroken. Caleb approached her, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Mom, that was incredible. I had no idea." Mara knelt, bringing herself to his eye level, hands steady on his shoulders. "There's a lot you don't know, Caleb. A lot I had to leave behind so you could grow safely. But today, you saw me. Not just your mom. You saw who I am." Tears filled Caleb's eyes as understanding and pride collided with awe. He had always looked up to her, but now he saw the full measure of her strength. Harper, standing nearby, nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in courage and respect. The hall slowly returned to celebration, but for Mara, Caleb, and Harper, the world had shifted. Secrets had been revealed, trust had been deepened, and the past had merged with the present in a way that would shape all their futures. The hall had returned to its festive rhythm, but for Mara, Caleb, and Harper, time seemed to move differently. The applause and chatter were background music to a profound moment. A mother, a son, and the acknowledgement of a past that had long been hidden. Mara's chest still rose and fell with adrenaline, but it was tempered now with relief. The storm had passed and the truth had found its place in the light. Caleb approached her slowly, his eyes wide with awe and emotion. "Mom? I can't believe..." His voice cracked, not from fear but from the weight of understanding. Every story she had hinted at, every lesson on courage and strength, had been a shadow of reality. Now he saw the full truth. The Marine who had survived ambushes, who had led squads, who had carried scars invisible and visible alike. Mara smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I did it all for you, Caleb. Everything I endured, every choice, every battle, every sacrifice, it was so you could have a chance to grow safely, to become the man you are today." He swallowed, a lump forming in his throat. Pride, love, reverence, and gratitude surged through him in a tidal wave. You're incredible. Not just a mom, a hero. And I didn't even know." Harper stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "He knows now," he said quietly, nodding toward Mara. "And he respects you maybe more than you think." Mara's eyes flicked toward him, a small smile acknowledging the bond forged through shared understanding. For the first time in decades, Mara felt the weight of secrecy lift. The tattoo on her arm, once a silent reminder of pain and loss, now symbolized survival, resilience, and the bridge between past and present. She had hidden it to protect her son, but revealing it had strengthened their bond in ways she hadn't anticipated. Caleb looked around the hall, still shimmering with celebration, and then back at his mother. "I've trained to face challenges, to handle pressure, but nothing compares to what you've survived. I hope one day I can be even half as strong as you." Mara chuckled softly, a sound filled with warmth and pride. "Strength isn't just about surviving battles, Caleb. It's about protecting what matters, loving fiercely, and standing tall even when the world expects you to crumble. You've already inherited that strength. Never forget it." The three of them, mother, son, and Marine Captain, stood together, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating a bond forged in courage, trust, and love. The past, once a shadow lurking in memory, was now a force connecting them, not separating them. Mara's heart swelled with the knowledge that she had finally bridged the gap between who she had been and who she was now. Caleb hugged her tightly, feeling the depth of her love, her courage, and her sacrifices. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "And I'm proud of you," Mara replied, tears glistening in her eyes. "Proud that you've grown into the man I hoped you would be, proud that you understand the choices we make, and proud that we face the world together. From now on, nothing hidden, nothing left unsaid." Harper stepped back, giving them space, a quiet witness to the reunion of past and present. Mara's life had been filled with battles, some fought in deserts, some in silence. But this emotional truth shared openly with the son she loved, was a victory unlike any other. The hall around them erupted in cheers as Caleb joined his fellow graduates, but Mara remained in place for a moment, letting the sunlight warm her, letting pride and relief wash through her. Her past was no longer a secret, it was a foundation, a legacy, and a bridge to her son's future. In that moment, Mara Ellison knew the battles weren't over, but for the first time she could face the future without fear. The past had been acknowledged, the present was alive, and the bond with her son had never been stronger. She had survived and now she was free.